quite nicely, and we left it burning, and we all came home.
The Victor, unglamorous but a vital workhorse, retired from strategic bombing duties to perform a quite different strategic task. These are the fuel tankers of the air. In order that Allied combat aircraft could operate at maximum effectiveness, spend as much time as possible near and over their targets, they were frequently refueled in mid-air, a tricky business that was a regular feature during the 38 days of unrelenting bombardment. Here too, pinpoint accuracy was what mattered.
Great stuff.
And the RAF crews earned American praise.
The Royal Air Force is very much like the United States Marine Corps. Yet they're very motivated. I would not want that mission that those guys fly because they're down low, they're in the AAA. It's a dirt mission and they are just doing a dynamite job with it. It takes real courage.
Iraqi resistance was mostly ineffective, but several planes did bring back the scars of combat, and in all, 6 Tornadoes were lost during the campaign. After the runway denial missions were mostly over, different sorts of bombs were deployed, and Tornadoes also carried rockets for some of their attacks. Day and night, the routine of the air assault continued. Planes to be serviced, airmen to face the most grueling campaign since the Second World War. The Allies intended to guarantee victory by winning in the air. By the 10th day of the air offensive, venerable buccaneers arrived from Britain to back up the Tornadoes. With them came the laser eyes out under the wings. This equipment would give the ultimate in precision guiding for bombs carried to the battle zone aboard the Tornadoes. Out in the Gulf, meantime, a large part of the United States aerial battalions were based, flying a lion's share of the vast number of sorties from huge aircraft carriers. Those sorties included planes equipped with early warning radar to give plenty of notice of any enemy fighter activity. As aircraft arrived and departed around the clock, it was astonishing just how few did not make it back from the bombing and strafing runs across Iraq and Iraqi-held Kuwait. Altogether, the war cost the Allies 51 planes. Flying's obviously pretty hazardous, but being on the deck of an aircraft carrier at such times clearly has its dangerous moments too. American carriers soon resembled the most hectic of commercial airfields, as places and paths were found for plane after plane, either preparing to fight or returning from a mission. The Americans also operated from land bases in eastern Saudi Arabia. All told, there were 1,800 Allied combat and backup aircraft involved in the war against Iraq. There was no shortage of targets to pick, but Scud missile sites became a priority. Here, hardened bunkers protecting Scuds are attacked. Watch for the Allied bombs zooming in from the bottom left. Mobile Scud launchers were hard to spot, but many were effectively dealt with. Pilots described, though, how intimidating AAA anti-aircraft artillery could be.
It looks a lot like, lights, flickering lights, like Christmas lights or something like that when the AAA's coming up. And then shortly after that, it looks like some big bomb fireworks or something like that going off. It was an awesome display, it truly was.
On and on went the air offensive. At its peak, 2,000 sorties were being undertaken every 24 hours. And it wasn't just from bases to the south of Iraq. At least one NATO airfield in Turkey on the enemy's northern flank was also in use. Out at sea, the very latest in conventional weaponry was aimed at the heart of Iraq, Tomahawk cruise missiles. 291 of them were fired from US battleships, each missile costing £500,000. They flew hundreds of miles to their targets. Again, Allied commanders declared that only military sites would be hit. The view from the ground. Western TV crews were on hand to record the sea-launched Tomahawks as they sped at 500 miles an hour over Baghdad. Smoke billows up after a missile finds its target somewhere in Baghdad's suburbs. By night, as well as by day, the expensive missiles were dispatched. Each one carried its own onboard computer. Inside its memory, details of the location of the target are locked in. They were launched to impact an hour before spy satellites passed over the target area, to take photographs, making accurate damage assessment possible.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch.
Missile away!
Yes, sir.
The missile's job was to demolish the heart of Iraq's means of survival, like Baghdad's main power station. Airborne missiles were used alongside the long-range Tomahawks.
This is on the front end of the weapon itself.
This is the SRAM missile, with a camera in its nose striking a hardened hangar. The first missile in this attack goes straight home. A second, however, wobbles before locking back onto its target and a devastating hit. General Schwarzkopf took particular pride in the precision with which his military could hit what they wanted, while not hitting people involved in non-military pursuits.
I'm now going to show you a picture of the luckiest man in Iraq on this particular day. Keep your eye on the crosshairs, right there. Look at here. Right through the crosshairs. And now in his rearview mirror.
He admitted, though, the danger.
Appropriate targets. We're being very, very careful in our direction of attacks to avoid damage of any kind to civilian installations. It's going to happen. It is absolutely going to happen. There's no question about it. But we're doing everything we can to prevent it. And that's not carpet bombing by any definition.
The effects on Iraq of the onslaught from the skies were catastrophic. As well as strict military targets, the Allies pounded everything that could help keep a war going. Power stations were a prime example. Government buildings were carefully picked out and wrecked, the results of the computerized precision targeting that the Allies employed to such remarkable effect. Baghdad suffered a blitz not seen since the last World War, though a strictly selective one. Communications were shattered. Not only was the Iraqis' military command and control structure knocked out, but the country's TV was forced off the air as well. The civilian population suffered badly. Fractured mains and sewers, compounded by heavy rainfall, had parts of Baghdad awash and prompted fears of disease. Bridges across the Tigris River came down as part of the Allied campaign to prevent military movements and disrupt supplies. There's no way of knowing exactly how many people died, for no matter how great the commitment to avoid such casualties, they did occur, as General Schwarzkopf prophesied. What the outside world saw of the damage done both to public and private buildings was strictly under the Iraqis' control. They maintained that Allies were deliberately hitting civilian targets. The truth seems to be that few stray bombs there were, but very few. What did happen was that people and property on the ground suffered a good deal from anti-aircraft fire which came down, and by incoming missiles destroyed in flight before they hit those carefully pre-programmed targets. Petrol dried up, ironic in a state which is one of the world's leading oil producers. But again, Allied bombing disrupted all aspects of life. Strangely, Western journalists who stayed in Baghdad reported little hostility from ordinary Iraqis, no matter how bad things got. Night after night, as Baghdad was intensively bombed, people took refuge in underground shelters and bunkers. For the ordinary people of Iraq, there was little glory, much misery, in a country unable to defend itself against the mightiest military powers of the globe. Their president was assumed to be in his own well-guarded bunker, as he and his lieutenants struggled to command their military forces, most of them strung out in the desert under constant Allied bombardment. As the pressure on Iraq grew, so did the strain and danger facing those living in its cities and big towns. Although Saddam Hussein's support faded sharply after the war, during it there was much talk of loyalty, and there were sometimes signs of anger too.
This is not a game. Those are human lives. Human lives. Enough of civilians.
Even accidental damage could be as heartrending as deliberate attack.
A rocket fell there behind us and damaged our house, as you see.
President Saddam Hussein will stay here, and we will stay with him until the end of the war, and we will have our big victory here against America and other countries.
Then, on February the 13th, a bunker in the Baghdad suburb of Amaria was bombed, and inside it died some 300 civilians, many women and children. The Iraqis declared it was well known to be an air raid shelter. It was a disastrous moment. Much of the Muslim world expressed outrage. America insisted, however, that the place was doubling as a military command center. Officials produced much evidence to support their opinion. A little later, a stray RAF bomb was to kill many civilians in the town of Fallujah. That time there was no argument. An accident of the ghastly sort all too common in war had occurred.
We are not indiscriminately targeting civilian targets, and I think that the very action of the Iraqis themselves demonstrate that they know damn well that we're not attacking civilian targets. Since right now they've dispersed their airplanes into residential areas, they've moved their headquarters into schools, they've moved their headquarters